First contact's bitter taste. The crystalline spires of the Azurian diplomatic vessel glittered like frozen lightning against the void of space. Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's chief xenolinguist, stood at the viewport of the human diplomatic corps ship Damascus, watching the approaching vessel with a mixture of awe and apprehension. After centuries of searching the stars, humanity had finally made contact with an advanced civilization, though perhaps advanced was an understatement. They're requesting docking alignment, announced Captain Marcus Rodriguez, his dark eyes fixed on the holographic display. Dr. Chen, are you ready for this? Sarah touched the neural interface at the base of her skull, the quantum processor humming softly as it cycled through the preliminary linguistic data they'd received. As ready as I'll ever be, Captain. Though I wish they'd given us more than 3 days to prepare for this meeting. The Azurians had appeared in Earth's solar system without warning, their ships moving with impossible grace through subspace. Their first transmission had been precise, clinical, and decidedly condescending. They were here to evaluate humanity's potential for inclusion in the galactic community. The unspoken message was clear. They were here to judge whether humans deserved to exist among the stars at all. The docking procedure was flawless, crystal meeting metal with barely a whisper. Sarah straightened her formal uniform and joined the reception party in the airlock chamber. The environmental sensors showed the Azurians had requested Earth-normal atmosphere and pressure. At least they were capable of adapting to human conditions. The inner door I-rised open, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The Azurians were beautiful in an alien way that defied description. Their bodies seemed to be composed of living crystal, internal lights pulsing in complex patterns that suggested thought and emotion. They moved with liquid grace, their crystalline forms somehow both solid and fluid. The leader of the delegation stepped forward, its form towering nearly 3 meters tall. When it spoke, its voice was pure harmonic resonance, translated by Sarah's neural interface into English. We are first speaker Lysithea of the Azurian Concordat. You may be honored by our presence. Sarah bit back a retort at the phrasing. Welcome aboard the Damascus. I am Dr. Sarah Chen, Chief Xenolinguist of the Human Diplomatic Corps. We are honored to receive you. The Azurians' internal lights flickered in what Sarah's interface suggested was amusement. Ah yes, your primitive translation devices. How quaint that you require technology to achieve what we do naturally. Please, lead us to your meeting chamber so we may begin our evaluation. The walking tour of the Damascus became an exercise in humiliation. The Azurians commented on everything from the crude artificial gravity to the simplistic quantum computers. By the time they reached the conference room, Sarah's fingernails had left crescents in her palms. Before we begin, first speaker Lysithea announced, we must address an obvious concern. Your species has only achieved faster than light travel within the last century. By our standards, you are barely beyond using stone tools. Why should we consider you worthy of joining galactic civilization? Sarah took a deep breath. With respect, first speaker, humanity has made remarkable progress in a short time. Our adaptability and innovation. Yes, Lysithea interrupted, crystal fragments chiming in what was clearly dismissal. You've managed to copy the basic technologies of space travel, but what have you created that is truly unique? What makes humanity anything more than clever animals playing with tools they barely understand? The conference room fell silent. Sarah felt her colleague's tension, saw Captain Rodriguez's jaw clench. But it was Dr. Amit Patel, their xenoarchaeologist, who spoke up. First speaker, if I may. While preparing for this meeting, I noticed something fascinating about the harmonic patterns in your speech. They bear a striking similarity to artifacts we've discovered on distant worlds, artifacts that predate humanity's emergence from Earth. For the first time, the Azurian delegation's lights flickered in what might have been surprise or alarm. Lysithea's voice took on a sharp edge. You are mistaken. The Azurian Concordat has existed for 10,000 years. We have no connection to primitive artifacts. Perhaps, Amit continued, his dark eyes intense, but science follows evidence, not assumptions. I would be very interested in comparing our archaeological findings with your historical records. That will not be necessary, Lysithea said flatly. Your archaeological data is surely flawed. We are done here for today. We will continue our evaluation tomorrow, though I must say, your prospects for approval seem limited. As the Azurian delegation departed, Sarah caught Amit's eye. What was that about artifacts? He smiled slightly. Just a hunch. But did you notice how quickly they shut down that line of questioning? For beings made of crystal, they're not very transparent. Keep digging, Sarah whispered. Something tells me we're going to need every advantage we can get. That night, as Sarah reviewed the day's recordings, she noticed something her neural interface had missed in real time. Beneath the Azurian's harmonics, there was a deeper pattern, almost like a song. It reminded her of something, but she couldn't quite place it. She flagged the data for further analysis, unaware that this small detail would soon unlock secrets that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The Archive of Whispers. The ancient ruins on Kepler 186 have stretched toward alien stars, their crystalline surfaces still somehow pristine after millennia of abandonment. Dr. Amit Patel ran his gloved hand along a wall etched with flowing patterns, his suit's sensors recording every detail. Behind him, their Azurian observer shifted restlessly, internal lights pulsing with barely concealed agitation. Your time in this sector is limited, human, Observer Thalassos reminded him for the third time in an hour. These ruins hold no significance. Amit smiled behind his helmet visor. Then you won't mind if I continue my insignificant research, Observer. He pressed his hand against another section of wall, feeling the subtle vibrations beneath his palm. According to their preliminary scans, these ruins were over 50,000 years old, far older than the Azurian Concordat claimed to be. His neural link buzzed with an incoming transmission from Sarah Chen aboard the Damascus. Amit, I've been analyzing those harmonic patterns you sent. There's something familiar about them, but I can't access the reference files. Every time I try, I hit Azurian encryption. How interesting, Amit murmured, watching Thalassos from the corner of his eye, almost as if someone doesn't want us making connections. He moved deeper into the ruins, following the patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. His team had discovered this site 3 days ago, and the Azurians had immediately tried to declare it off-limits. It had taken direct intervention from Earth's diplomatic courts to maintain their research rights. Dr. Patel. Thalassos's voice held a warning edge. That section has not been structurally verified. For your safety, you must return to the entrance. Amit ignored him, his attention caught by something ahead. The patterns on the walls were changing, becoming more intricate, more musical. He activated his suit's advanced scanning protocols, recording everything. Sarah, he whispered into his comm, are you seeing this? The patterns, they're not just decorative, they're notation. It's like some kind of musical mathematics. Sarah replied, excitement clear in her voice. The harmonics match the underlying frequencies we detected in Azurian speech, but these are far more complex. Amit, I think these might be instructions. Before Amit could respond, his lights caught something that made him freeze. At the end of the corridor, a vast chamber opened up, its walls covered in flowing script that seemed to dance in his beam. But it wasn't the size of the chamber that stopped him. It was what the script spelled out. Sarah, he breathed, I'm sending you a live feed. Tell me I'm not hallucinating. There was a long pause as Sarah received the transmission. When she spoke again, her voice was hushed with awe. That's impossible. That's Sanskrit, ancient Sanskrit, but mixed with something else. Something older. Thalassos moved with shocking speed for a crystalline being, placing himself between Amit and the chamber. This area is now restricted by order of the Azurian Concordat. Your research permit is revoked. But Amit had already seen enough. The script on the walls told a story, one that the Azurians had been hiding for millennia. It spoke of a time when organic and crystalline life evolved together, when music and mathematics were one, when humanity's ancestors and the precursors of the Azurians were not enemies or strangers, but partners in exploring the cosmos. Observer Thalassos, Amit said carefully, noting how the Azurians' internal lights had shifted to a dangerous red hue. Would you care to explain why an allegedly primitive species' ancient language appears in ruins that predate your civilization? You will leave now. Thalassos's voice had lost all pretense of diplomacy. Any attempt to share or publish your findings will be considered an act of aggression against the Concordat. Amit began backing toward the exit, making sure his suit was still transmitting everything to the Damascus. The truth has a way of emerging, observer, no matter how deeply it's buried. He barely made it back to his shuttle before Azurian security forces arrived to quarantine the site. As they broke atmosphere, Sarah's voice came through his comm again. Amit, I've been cross-referencing everything we found with ancient Earth texts. The similarities aren't just in the script, they're in the mathematical principles underlying both languages. It's like finding out Shakespeare and Sophocles had the same teacher. They'll try to suppress this, Emmett warned, watching the ruins disappear beneath clouds of alien dust. The Azurians have built their entire civilization on the belief that they're superior to organic life. This evidence suggests we share common origins, maybe even common ancestors. Let them try to suppress it, Sarah replied, and Emmett could hear the smile in her voice. I've already transmitted our findings to every major university and research center on Earth. The quantum encryption is keyed to release everything if anything happens to us. As his shuttle docked with the Damascus, Amit couldn't help but smile. The Azurians had spent thousands of years looking down on humanity, believing themselves to be the pinnacle of evolution. But in their arrogance, they'd forgotten a fundamental truth. Knowledge, like water, finds its own level. And the flood was just beginning. Breaking crystal. The great archive of the Azurian Concordat hummed with crystalline resonance as first speaker Lysithea faced the emergency council. The vast chamber, normally a place of serene contemplation, crackled with tension. Holographic displays showed the human discoveries spreading across Earth's information networks like wildfire. The humans must be stopped, Elder Resonator Kix declared, his crystalline form pulsing angry red. Their evidence threatens the very foundation of our society. Already, some of our younger crystals are asking dangerous questions. Lysithea's own internal lights flickered with concern. She had just received reports of protests in the outer colonies, unheard of in Azurian society. Young crystals were gathering in the resonance chambers, demanding access to the sealed historical archives. Perhaps, a quiet voice cut through the chamber. It is time we faced our own truth. All lights turned to focus on Archivist Zena, one of the oldest living Azurians. Her crystalline form was ancient, showing the complex facets that only came with millennia of growth. She had been uncharacteristically silent during the human crisis until now. You risk shattering everything we've built, Kix warned, but Zena continued undeterred. I have served as archivist for over 2,000 years, she said, her harmonics carrying the weight of ages. In the deepest vaults, there are records that even the Council has never seen. Records that speak of a time before the Concordat, before we forgot our origins. The chamber erupted in discordant harmonics as multiple council members tried to speak at once. Lysithea raised her central spire, calling for order. Archivist Zena, are you suggesting these human claims have merit? I am suggesting, Zena replied, her lights pulsing with determination, that we have built our civilization on carefully constructed lies. The humans didn't discover our secret, they uncovered their own truth, which happens to be intertwined with ours. Meanwhile, aboard the Damascus, Sarah Chen was making her own breakthrough. The ship's quantum processors had finally decoded the deeper patterns in Azurian speech, revealing something extraordinary. She watched in amazement as ancient harmonic sequences aligned perfectly with prehistoric human musical scales. It's not just similar, she explained to Captain Rodriguez and her colleagues. The mathematical foundations are identical. The Azurians didn't evolve their harmonic language independently. They inherited it, just like we inherited our capacity for music and complex speech. From whom? Rodriguez asked, leaning forward to study the holographic comparisons. We're calling them the harmonious, Amit replied, pointing to reconstructed images from the ruins. They weren't just our ancestors. They were a civilization that understood the fundamental connection between music, mathematics, and the physical world. They could literally sing reality into new shapes. Back in the Azurian archive, the crisis was reaching a breaking point. Young crystals had breached the outer security barriers, demanding access to the sealed records. Zena stood before the massive vault doors, facing down her own security forces. You cannot stop the resonance of truth, she declared, her form glowing with ancient power. It vibrates through every crystal, every atom of our being. We were not born superior. We were born together, with our organic cousins, in the song of creation. The security forces hesitated, their own crystalline matrices humming in harmony with her words. Throughout the Concordat, similar scenes were playing out as younger Azurians began to resonate with frequencies they had been taught to ignore, the ancient songs that connected them to their true heritage. Lysithea watched from the council chamber as the carefully maintained order of millennia began to crack. What have these humans done? She whispered. They've reminded us of who we really are, Zena answered, approaching the first speaker. The question now is, do we continue to deny our shared heritage, or do we embrace it and discover what we might become together? Before Lysithea could respond, every crystal in the archive began to resonate with a frequency not heard in 50,000 years. In orbit above Earth, Azurian ships registered the same harmonic pattern, and in human cities across the planet, ancient instruments, untouched for centuries in museums, began to vibrate in sympathy. The Song of Awakening had begun, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. Songs of the Stars. The Damascus's observation deck had become an impromptu concert hall. Sarah Chen stood before an ancient Chinese guqin, her fingers hovering over strings that hummed with otherworldly resonance. Around her, screens displayed similar scenes from across Earth. A Tibetan singing bowl floating inches above its cushion, Australian didgeridoos thrumming with power, Native American flutes emitting light as they played themselves. It's like they're remembering, Emmett whispered, watching as Sarah's neural interface translated the harmonics into visual patterns that matched perfectly with Azurian script. Every ancient musical instrument on Earth is responding to that signal from the archive. Through the viewport, they could see the Azurian ships in orbit. Rather than maintaining their usual perfect crystalline formations, they had arranged themselves in spiral patterns that pulsed with multicolored light. The effect was both beautiful and eerily familiar. It matches the double helix, Sarah realized, recognizing the pattern. DNA and crystal growth patterns, expressed through sacred geometry. We've been carrying this knowledge in our genes all along. We just couldn't access it. The guqin's strings began to vibrate on their own, producing notes that seemed to bend reality itself. Sarah closed her eyes, letting the ancient memory surface. Her neural interface struggled to process the information flooding through it. Not just sounds, but mathematical equations expressed through music, the fundamental language of the universe. On the Azurian homeworld, Archivist Zena led a procession of young crystals into the deepest vault of the archive. The massive doors, sealed for millennia, had opened at the touch of the awakening harmonics. Inside, they found something that shattered every preconception of their history. A vast crystal matrix filled the chamber, but unlike the pure crystalline forms of modern Azurians, this one contained organic material preserved within its structure. It was a perfect fusion of organic and crystalline life, a living record of what both species had once been. This is first singer harmony, Zena announced, her voice resonating with newfound frequencies. The one who led both our peoples to the stars, before the Great Division. Within this matrix lies the complete record of our shared history. As if responding to her words, the ancient matrix began to pulse with light and sound. Images formed in the air around it, organic beings with crystalline growths, crystalline beings with organic cores, all working together in perfect harmony. They were using music to reshape matter itself, building impossible structures with nothing but sound and mathematics. Back on the Damascus, Sarah's hands finally touched the Gukun's strings. The moment she did, her consciousness expanded exponentially. Through the ancient instrument, she could feel the vibrations of every other awakened artifact on Earth, every resonating crystal in the Azurian fleet. They were all playing parts of the same vast symphony. "It's a key," she gasped, her fingers moving of their own accord across the strings. The instruments, the ruins, our languages, they're all keys to unlock something bigger, something we were meant to remember together. In orbit, the Azurian ships began to move in new patterns, their crystalline hulls vibrating in harmony with Earth's awakened instruments. Where the frequencies intersected, space itself seemed to ripple and fold. Captain Rodriguez watched in awe as new readings flooded his screens. "These harmonics," he said, "they're not just sound or mathematics. They're instructions for manipulating space-time at the quantum level." Our ancestors weren't just advanced. They had technology so profound it looked like magic. Amidst archaeological databases, we're updating frantically as new connections emerge. Every ancient civilization on Earth had myths about the power of music, he realized. The Aboriginal dreamtime, Orpheus charming reality itself, the Hindu concept of Nada Brahma, the world as sound. They weren't myths at all. They were memories. In the archive vault, first speaker Lysithea watched as the ancient matrix downloaded its knowledge into waiting crystals. The truth could no longer be denied. The Azurians had not evolved to perfection in isolation. They had deliberately separated themselves from their organic heritage, choosing crystalline purity over the messy but powerful synthesis of their past. "We thought we were ascending," she admitted to Zena, "but we were only running away from our own complexity. These humans, these cousins we tried to dismiss, they kept the other half of our heritage alive without even knowing it." The symphony reached a crescendo. On Earth, in orbit, and across Azurian space, the music of awakening built to a moment of transcendent clarity. In that moment, both species glimpsed their true potential, not as separate forms of life, but as complementary expressions of the universe's endless creativity. The ancient matrix's final message unfurled like a flower of pure sound. "Apart, you are incomplete. Together, you can reshape the stars themselves. The choice is yours." Symphony of Unity. The great hall of the Azurian archive had been transformed. Where once crystalline beings sat in rigid hierarchies, now humans and Azurians gathered together, their very presence defying millennia of separation. Sarah Chen stood before them both, her Gukun hovering in a field of pure harmonic energy, while first speaker Lysithea's crystalline form resonated in perfect harmony with the ancient instrument. For 50,000 years, Lysithea's voice rang out. "We told ourselves we were superior. We buried our past and forgot that our greatest achievements came from unity, not division. Today, we remember who we truly are." The combined Azurian Council and Earth's diplomatic delegation watched in amazement as Sarah's fingers danced across the Gukun's strings. Each note caused ripples in reality itself, and the Azurians' crystalline forms vibrated in response, creating complex geometric patterns in the air. "The harmonious didn't vanish," Sarah explained, her neural interface translating the music into both human language and Azurian frequencies. "They didn't die out or ascend to another plane. They became us, all of us. Some chose the path of crystal, others the path of flesh, but the potential for both remained dormant in our genes, in our very atoms." Emmett stepped forward, projecting images from ruins across a dozen worlds. Every ancient human civilization carried fragments of this knowledge. Every Azurian crystal bore the echoes of organic life. We weren't meant to be separate species, but different expressions of the same cosmic song. In orbit above both Earth and the Azurian homeworld, the combined fleets had arranged themselves into massive geometric arrays. As the harmony in the archive grew stronger, the ships began to resonate. Space itself seemed to bend and flex around them, responding to frequencies that hadn't been heard in 50 millennia. The barriers between organic and crystalline life are not fixed, archivist Zena announced, her ancient form glowing with newly awakened power. The Harmonious understood that consciousness could flow between forms, that beings could be both flesh and crystal, that the very structure of reality could be reshaped by the right combinations of sound and mathematics. To demonstrate, she began to sing in frequencies that made the air shimmer. Gradually, organic patterns began to form within her crystalline matrix, not as impurities, but as natural extensions of her being. Around the chamber, younger Azurians watched in wonder as their own forms began to exhibit similar changes, their rigid crystal structures becoming more fluid, more alive. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the Damascus's comm system. "You need to see this. The harmonic resonance between the fleets, it's creating some kind of reconstruction effect. The ships are changing." On every screen, they watched as Azurian vessels developed organic components, while human ships grew crystalline lattices. The two technologies weren't just combining. They were remembering their shared origin, returning to a form that transcended the limitations of both. This is what they feared, Sarah realized, her fingers never stopping their dance across the strings. Not that humans were primitive, but that our very existence reminded them of what they'd given up. Every song, every poem, every dance, they were echoes of the unity they tried to forget. The music reached a crescendo, and reality itself seemed to hold its breath. In that moment of perfect harmony, every human and Azurian experienced a vision of their shared future. Cities that grew like living crystals, ships that sailed through space on solar winds, beings who could shift between forms as easily as changing clothes, and technologies that worked with the fundamental forces of the universe instead of against them. First speaker Lysithia's form had changed dramatically. Organic patterns now flowed through her crystal matrix like frozen rivers of light. "We offer humanity more than just membership in galactic civilization," she declared. "We offer partnership in rebuilding what was lost. Together, we can rediscover everything the Harmonious knew, and perhaps go even further." Sarah set the Gookin down gently, though its strings continued to hum with power. "Earth accepts," she said simply. "Not as subordinates or equals, but as kin finding their way home." The archive's walls began to pulse with light as ancient systems, dormant for 50,000 years, came back online. Across the galaxy, other ruins and artifacts awakened, responding to the harmonic signal of reunion. The message spread from world to world. The children of the Harmonious were whole again. In the days that followed, both species would begin the long process of relearning their shared heritage. Human musicians worked with Azurian resonators to rediscover the mathematics of reality. Scientists of both species studied the organic crystalline interface that held the key to unprecedented technological advances. And in universities across Earth and the Concordat, young humans and Azurians learned each other's languages, finding in their differences the very things that made them strongest together. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting for this moment. In the endless dance of evolution, separation had served its purpose. Now it was time for harmony to prevail once more, as two estranged branches of the cosmic tree grew back together, stronger for having grown apart. And in the deepest vault of the archive, the ancient matrix of first singer harmony pulsed with quiet satisfaction. The song had come full circle at last.